Laughter echoed under the crystal chandeliers as champagne flutes clinked and camera flashes lit the ballroom. Wealthy guests in tailored suits and floor-length gowns circled Tyler Cross, the charismatic millionaire host of the evening's conservation charity gala. At the center of attention stood Sierra Langford, draped in an emerald gown and leaning into Tyler's side like she owned him. And tonight, she did. But then, a different sound pierced the music. A soaked figure stumbled past the marble entry, gasping for breath, one hand clutching her swollen belly, the other pushing dripping hair from her face. The room turned. Gasps replaced the laughter. Whispers grew louder. It was Ava. Tyler's face remained still, practiced. He took 2 steps forward, raising one hand like a conductor calming an orchestra. "Ava," he said smoothly, his voice carrying across the hall. "You shouldn't be here." Sierra smirked, a slow, venomous curve of her lips. She pushed. "Past the guards," she whispered loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "Again." Ava's voice trembled as she pointed toward Tyler. He locked me out." "Then, your guards, they—" She stumbled, her legs shaking as the water from the estate's koi pool soaked through the expensive carpet. She looked like a drowned shadow of the poised woman she once was, but her eyes burned with clarity. "This is my house," she said through clenched teeth. "You drugged me. You lied to the press. And now you parade her like nothing happened?" 2 large men in suits appeared at Tyler's subtle nod. "For your safety, ma'am," one of them muttered as they grabbed Ava by the arms. She screamed, struggling as her heels slipped on the wet floor. "You can't! Tyler! This is our child! You can't just erase me!" "She's been under psychiatric watch," Tyler said to the room, addressing no one and everyone at once. "She stopped taking her medication. I didn't want to do this publicly, but she left me no choice." Ava was dragged past silent guests, her heels scraping stone. "You're lying," she yelled. "I'm not unstable. He wants me gone because I know the truth." Her voice faded as the heavy doors closed behind her. Tyler let out a breath. Sierra leaned in and kissed his cheek, her hand brushing the fabric over his chest where a small earpiece blinked green. Outside, Ava's screams were muffled by the roar of the estate's engines as a black van pulled up to a side path near the greenhouse wing. She fought, kicked, and cried out, but the guards shoved her inside. "Where are you taking me?" she pleaded. "Where's the hospital?" Neither man answered. 10 minutes later, the van stopped behind a locked iron gate that hadn't been opened in years. The path was overgrown, vines curling over the stone steps of an old structure that looked abandoned, a forgotten part of the estate once used for exotic animal storage. The vivarium. Ava's eyes widened. "No, please, not here." One of the guards pulled the rusted door open with a metallic screech. "Doctor will meet you soon," he said without expression. He pushed her inside. The door slammed behind her, locking with a click that echoed like a death sentence. The darkness swallowed her. Only dim red emergency bulbs buzzed overhead. The air smelled like mildew and dust, but beneath that was something sharper, something alive. Her breathing quickened. The room stretched wider than it looked outside. Glass panels lined the walls, some cracked, others fogged, but every enclosure was empty. Movement. Something slithered across the ground. She backed away, heart pounding, trying to steady herself against the wall. Another movement. Closer this. Time. The red light caught a shine of scales. Dozens of them. Thin bodies, black and brown, sliding between cracks in the floor and through broken grates in the wall. Snakes. Real. Moving. Alive. Her scream tore through the chamber. She turned, scrambling toward the door, pounding with both fists. "Let me out! There are snakes! Tyler! You'll kill me and the baby! Please!" No one answered. The silence that followed was worse than rejection. It was calculated, planned. A rattlesnake raised its head just a foot away from her. Its tongue flicked the air. Ava froze. She was trapped. Barefoot now, the hem of her dress tangled in vines and dirt. Another snake slithered past her leg, but didn't strike. Her breath came in quick, shallow gasps as she pressed herself into a corner. More snakes emerged. Dozens. Some coiled near. The edges, others moved with eerie purpose. Ava crouched low, shielding her stomach with both arms, tears running down her cheeks. "Please," she whispered. "Not like this. Not like this." Then something odd happened. The snakes stopped. Not one moved closer. Their bodies pulsed gently, forming a slow circle around her. One hissed, but not at her, toward the far wall, almost in warning. Another arched its head, then lowered it, as if in submission. Ava didn't move. Her mind raced, but her instincts stilled her. The creatures weren't attacking. They were reacting. The largest of the snakes, a thick copperhead with dull eyes, slithered up to her bare foot and gently curled beside it, not touching, not threatening, just existing. A camera above her flickered to life. In a dark control room on the upper estate level, Tyler leaned back in his leather chair, sipping bourbon. "Fascinating," he muttered, watching the feed. Sierra glanced over his shoulder and raised an eyebrow. "They didn't bite," he said. "She's not afraid." "Or maybe," Sierra said coldly, "they know she's already dead to you." Tyler didn't smile. He just leaned closer to the monitor, watching Ava surrounded by the snakes, not as a victim, but as a mystery. "She always was different," he murmured. "Let's see what else they do." The red emergency light flickered overhead as Ava huddled against the cold, cracked floor of the vivarium, her arms wrapped tightly around her belly, now visibly pulsing with life inside her. The snakes had retreated into the shadows once the light dimmed further, as if they'd accepted her presence. The camera in the corner still blinked, its lens unmoving but very much active. She hadn't slept. Just waited, listened, survived. Upstairs, Tyler sat with his sleeves rolled up, eyes glued to the screen. He barely blinked, mesmerized by how she moved, how the snakes moved around her, not attacking, not recoiling. "She's not normal," he muttered. "Something's off." Sierra entered, still in her silk robe, holding a tablet with the latest media reports. "They're already running your angle. Headline reads, 'Tyler Cross fights for child's future, a midwife's breakdown.'" She smirked and glanced at the screen. "She's still breathing? Damn. You think she's part reptile or just lucky?" Tyler didn't respond. He tapped the screen, zooming in on Ava's curled body. "Leave her another day. I want to see what happens when she breaks." But Ava wouldn't break. Hours later, clouds roared outside. Thunder cracked against the estate's old infrastructure. Rain sheeted down so hard it blurred the camera feed. Somewhere in the distance, a lightning bolt struck a transformer. For a second, the entire mansion flickered. Then the screen went black. In the basement, the mechanical lock disengaged with a loud pop. The door creaked slightly open. Ava's eyes snapped toward it. She didn't hesitate. She crawled toward the opening, then ran, barefoot, blood on, her heels, her soaked dress dragging through puddles. Alarms failed to sound. Backups hadn't kicked in. The old vivarium systems were offline. She moved through underground passages she remembered from years ago, tunnels used for transporting animals and equipment before Tyler shut this wing down. The floor sloped downward. Pipes hissed around her. She found a rusted drain cover and pulled with shaking hands. It groaned open just enough. She slid through into a narrow storm tunnel. The outside world exploded with wind and thunder as she emerged near the marshy back edge of the estate. Behind her, the house loomed in the dark, its lights flickering like an unstable heart. Ava turned and ran, mud sucking at her steps. She didn't stop until the mansion was swallowed by trees and rain. By morning, helicopters flew overhead. News vans lined the estate's gates. Tyler stood at a podium set up near the front garden, flanked by private security and corporate lawyers. His tone was solemn, practiced. "I want to thank you all for coming on such short notice," he began. "Many of you know my wife, Ava Cross, has been struggling with severe perinatal psychosis for the past few months. We kept it quiet out of love and respect for her privacy." Cameras clicked furiously. "She disappeared last night during a lightning storm. We believe she may have harmed herself. A full search is underway, and I'm offering a private reward for any information that can help bring her home." He paused, just long enough to appear choked up, then gestured to his left. Sierra, draped in conservative beige and cradling a small bump beneath her dress, stepped forward. "As her friend," Sierra said softly, "and as someone who is now carrying a child that will share blood with Ava's baby, I just want to say, we don't want pity. We want healing. We want closure." The crowd murmured. Tyler nodded along. "And in light of her disappearance, with full approval from her previously assigned counsel, the Ava Cross Trust will now be managed by me for the protection and future of both children." No one questioned it. Not publicly. The documents had been arranged months in advance. The lawyers had been paid. The psychiatric files, fabricated but convincing, had already circulated. In a single morning, Ava's identity was reduced to a line in a press release and a tragic backstory for Sierra to exploit. But Ava wasn't dead. She crawled through mangroves until the city sounds faded and the buzz of insects and swamp life surrounded her. Her hands trembled from dehydration. Her lips cracked. But her body kept moving, pulled forward by the child inside her, and the fire in her bones. At one point, she collapsed beside a tree root in the Everglades, curling into herself as rain pelted her skin. Her dress was in tatters. Her feet were torn. But she closed her eyes and whispered, "He won't win." Back at the estate, Sierra posed for the media. "It's been hard," she said during an exclusive interview on Tyler's private terrace. "But we want to focus on building something beautiful from this tragedy. Tyler and I are expecting. He's going to be such a good father." The interviewer smiled. "And how are you holding up emotionally?" Sierra blinked once. "I've always been resilient. Some women are just built to survive anything." Tyler raised a toast to the cameras, to the future and to the legacy we're protecting. Somewhere in the swamp, Ava ripped off the final piece of her dress's train and used it to wrap her blistered feet. She didn't know where she was headed, but she knew who she was again. And she'd make sure the world remembered too. Ava's body gave out at the edge of a dirt path, her hands buried in the gravel, her skin streaked with blood, mud, and salt. The storm had passed, but the heat was rising again, thick and heavy around her. She dragged herself forward inch by inch until her hand hit something solid. A wooden step. A faded sign above read, "No trespassing. Research station closed." She collapsed against the door, her fingers scraping the edge as she pounded once, weakly, then again. The world swam in and out of focus until the door creaked open, and a flashlight beam fell over her swollen belly and cracked lips. She woke to the hum of generators and the smell of clean bandages. Her head was resting on a cot inside what looked like an old field lab. Vials lined the walls, snakeskins hung drying in the corner, and a rusted metal desk was covered in weathered notes. A woman in her 60s, with short gray curls and sharp eyes, knelt beside her, checking her vitals with clinical efficiency. "You should be dead," the woman said plainly, "but you're not. So tell me who the hell you are, and why the hell you had cottonmouth tracks on your dress." Ava struggled to speak, her throat raw. "Name's Ava Cross." The woman froze. "Tyler's wife?" Ava nodded. Dr. Nora Vance sat back, crossing her arms. You've got some nerve showing up here. 2 days passed before Ava could walk again. Nora, despite her bitterness, fed her, dressed her wounds, and moved her into a small room above the shed. On the third morning, Ava followed the sound of hissing to the open-air enclosure behind the lab. Dozens of snakes slithered calmly in protected habitats, each with a nameplate and origin tag. Nora was standing near the largest glass tank, her gloved hand resting on a python's back. "You're lucky they didn't bite you," she said, without turning. "The ones Tyler keeps? They're not normal anymore?" Ava approached slowly, still limping. "You used to work with him, didn't you?" Nora gave a humorless laugh. 10 years ago, before he figured out there was more money in performance than conservation. He started paying labs to tweak venom strains, trying to breed hybrids. Marketed it as research, but sold the results to private collectors and underground shows. She looked over her shoulder. "And when I blew the whistle, my grant disappeared, and so did my reputation." Ava's eyes welled, but she didn't cry. "He locked me in a vivarium with the snakes." Nora's expression didn't change, but her voice softened. "And they didn't touch you?" "They circled me, backed away." Nora stared at her for a long moment, then motioned toward the lab. "I need a blood sample." Hours later, Ava sat at Nora's desk flipping through an old stack of folders. Her name wasn't on any of them. Not the estate title, not the trust. Not even the conservation foundation she'd co-founded with Tyler 5 years ago. Every document had been altered, every signature forged or legally overridden. Her fingerprints had been wiped from digital access logs. Legally, she didn't exist. Nora slammed a folder down beside her. "You need to see this." She opened a file with Sierra's name on it. "I pulled the health records from a clinic she used. 2 of the pregnancy tests were duplicates. Copied, not scanned. This one?" Nora pointed at a third document. "From a fertility clinic, under a fake name. She's been claiming she's pregnant since the day you disappeared." Nora handed over a black and white ultrasound with someone else's name watermarked faintly in the corner. Ava clenched her jaw. "She's not carrying anything but lies." A buzz came from the radio near the wall. Nora answered it. The voice on the other end was quick and clipped. "Dr. Vance, it's Dax. I'm 20 minutes out. Got the files." Ava frowned. "Who's that?" "Dax Reed," Nora said, setting down the receiver. "Wildlife journalist. You'll like him. He's been tracking Tyler's funding shell games for 2 years. Didn't know you were involved, until now." 20 minutes later, a battered Jeep pulled up the gravel path. A tall man in his late 30s stepped out, wearing cargo pants, a press badge, and eyes that didn't miss much. He introduced himself quickly, then spread documents across Nora's workbench. "Tyler's been funneling donations from the Conservation Trust through offshore holding companies. The real money's going to illegal animal sales, but no one's talking. Too many sponsors in his pocket." He pointed at a flowchart linking bank accounts, foundation branches, and an account in Ava's name, one she'd never opened. "This is how he's painting you as unstable. These withdrawals make it look like you emptied your own accounts and fled." Ava leaned against the table, breathing through the weight of it. "He didn't just erase me. He rebuilt the narrative. So no one would believe me if I came back." Dax nodded grimly. "That's why we don't just come back. We make them see. And we start with science." Nora tossed him a sealed test tube. "Her blood sample. I need a lab to confirm my hypothesis." "What? Hypothesis?" Ava asked. Nora looked at her with the same clinical focus she had when they met. "You produced something unusual, a pheromone maybe, something that disrupted the snake's aggression. It's rare, but not impossible. If we prove it and match it to Tyler's altered snake genome, we can prove he put you in a death trap knowingly." Ava's breath caught. "We can prove attempted murder." Dax nodded. "And connect it to financial fraud, endangerment, Illegal wildlife abuse. This isn't just a comeback. This is a takedown. She looked at both of them. Her allies now. Two people Tyler thought he'd buried in irrelevance and silence. And they were building the kind of truth no PR team could drown. Ava sat straighter. Her voice didn't shake. Then let's burn it all down. The sky outside Nora's shelter had turned a deep gray, matching the weight Ava carried in her chest. Dax clicked through files on his laptop while Nora pulled dusty boxes from storage, each one holding fragments of a story Tyler had tried to erase. Ava sat between them, a pen in one hand, a glass of water in the other, her fingers trembling. Less now. They'd traced the money, they'd found the fake test results, but what Nora uncovered next twisted everything in a way none of them expected. "This is a registry," Nora said, dropping a stack of printed archives onto the table. "Public engagements, weddings, annulments." I cross-referenced the Langford name with the Cross family legacy fund filings. Ava leaned in. "And?" Nora opened a file and pointed to the top page. There it was, clear as sunlight. Sierra Langford, formerly Sierra Wolf, engaged to Richard Cross, Tyler's father. A full engagement 6 years ago, quietly ended without public explanation, no scandal, no coverage, but the timeline matched too well. Dax scrolled through property records. She was given a townhome in Charleston by Richard 3 months after the engagement ended. Probably hush money. Ava's breath turned shallow. She didn't just appear in Tyler's life. She was planted, recycled. "She's not some influencer who got lucky," Nora added. "She's a professional manipulator. And she knew Tyler's blind spots. She was sleeping with his father first, probably even while planning to use him. Then moved on to the son. For the inheritance." Dax stood up. "And it gets worse." He handed Ava a copy of an email chain. Her eyes scanned the screen, and her stomach turned. "This is Elise," she whispered. "Your sister," Dax confirmed. "She's not in Europe. She never was." The emails showed wire transfers from Tyler's legal firm to an account in Elise's name. Attached was a psychiatric report, signed, notarized, and stamped with Ava's medical provider's logo. A false report. Written by Elise. It described Ava as paranoid, obsessively delusional, and dangerous to herself and others. It was dated 2 weeks before Tyler claimed Ava had fled. Ava couldn't breathe. The paper slipped from her fingers and hit the table with a dull tap. Her world was crumbling again, this time from the inside. "She forged that?" Her voice cracked. "My own sister. Gave them what they needed to lock me up." "She's on Sierra's payroll," Dax confirmed. "She helped fake the mental health documents, gave interviews to private security, told them you'd been hearing voices." Nora approached slowly, arms steady. "She was the last family you trusted, wasn't she?" Ava nodded, then collapsed into the nearest chair, her whole body curling inward. "She used to braid my hair when I was little. She was the one who stayed with me the first night after I told Mom I was pregnant. I thought at least she loved me." Nora kneeled beside her, one arm wrapping gently around Ava's back. "I know what betrayal like that feels like. It doesn't fade, but it can burn clean." Ava didn't sob. Her shoulders didn't shake. She sat there, silent, for a long time. Then her fingers curled into fists. She stood slowly, pulling herself upright. "I'm done hoping people will do the right thing. I'm done playing defense." Dax looked up from the laptop. "What do you mean?" Ava's voice was steady now. "I'm not hiding anymore. I'm not surviving. I'm going to destroy every lie they've ever told. I want Sierra ruined. I want Elise arrested. And I want Tyler to see me in the room when it all falls apart." Nora nodded with quiet pride. "Then we need more than proof. We need a plan." Ava turned to the wall behind her, where old press clippings hung from thumbtacks. Headlines from Tyler's conservation galas, Sierra's magazine features, and Elise's wellness startup launch. She took a pushpin and stabbed it through the middle of Sierra's grinning photo. Start digging deeper into Elise's accounts. I want to know how much she took and when. Track the dates. See if they match up with when I was in medical facilities or off the grid. Dax was already typing. Nora, I need access to everything Tyler's company filed with the government regarding conservation work. Import records, shipping logs, grant applications. Already pulling them, Nora replied. We'll find the snakes, and we'll find the loopholes. Ava reached for a folder Dax had left earlier, flipping through old images of Tyler's animal enclosures. He thought I'd die in that room, that I was weak, that the snakes would do his work. For him, he underestimated what you are, Nora said. Ava's eyes flashed. He underestimated what I'm willing to become. That night, Ava sat alone under the stars, her feet dipped in the quiet stream that bordered Nora's land. The moonlight caught her reflection in the water, not soft, not broken, hardened, focused. She reached down and touched her belly, whispering, You're not going to be born into their story. We're going to write our own. And this time, the whole world would read it. The lights of Miami glittered like broken glass across the bay as a sleek black car pulled into the underground valet entrance of the Azure Heights Hotel. A woman stepped out, tall, poised, dressed in a tailored navy jumpsuit with her dark brown hair tucked into a polished bun. She adjusted the oversized glasses that hid her eyes and glanced once into the rearview mirror of the valet booth. Her ID badge read, Ray Middleton, Institutional Investment Analyst, Seattle Global Fund. But the reflection showed something else entirely. It was Ava. She'd rehearsed every movement, every look, every calculated nod. Months of silence had taught her restraint. Now it was time to walk into the fire, not as the discarded wife of Tyler Cross, but as the woman he never saw coming. Inside the private dining room on the 43rd floor, the city stretched behind floor-to-ceiling glass, but all eyes were on the long table at the center where board members from Cross Global Holdings gathered with crystal glasses and quiet power. Tyler stood at the head, shaking hands, smiling with a practiced chill, and beside him, draped in champagne silk, was Sierra, glowing, laughing, resting one hand protectively on the swell of her stomach. Ava didn't flinch. She made her way to the side of the room, claiming her seat with the others from her firm. Nora's forged credentials and Dax's tech rig had cleared every background check. No one questioned her presence, not even Tyler, who gave her a polite nod as he passed by her table. He had no idea who she was. For the next hour, she sat silently, observing. Sierra faked a wince when standing, holding her back like the baby was heavy. A few women fussed over her, one asking for due dates, another joking about baby names. Ava snapped photos quietly under the table. A clear shot of Sierra holding a wine glass when she thought no one was looking, another of her rubbing, a pillow tied under her dress when she stepped behind a half-open door. Later, as the guests were led into the adjacent lounge, Ava drifted toward the corner where two senior board members were whispering. One had left his phone on the edge of the drinks table, screen open. A quick slide of her pocket device, and Dax had remote access. The inbox lit up back at the shelter. Financial statements, encrypted memos, even meeting transcripts from investor calls where Sierra posed as acting legacy partner. Ava made her rounds slowly, making small talk, laughing where necessary. Her accent was softer now, her manner refined. She signed her name with flourish on the investor wall, Ray Middleton, just as Sierra stepped behind her. You're new, Sierra said, voice sugary with a blade underneath. Have we met? Ava turned, keeping her smile tight. I don't believe so. Seattle Global. Just small cap observation today. Sierra's eyes narrowed. She held out her hand. Ava shook it, firm and cold. Pleasure, Sierra said. You smell familiar. Ava chuckled politely. That's the hotel soap, I'm afraid. Everyone ends up with the same scent. Then she walked away. Back in the elevator, Ava reached into her handbag and pulled out a velvet pouch. Inside, coiled tightly and dead from frost, was one of Tyler's rare snakes, the copper hybrid with the surgically altered fangs. She placed it inside a climate-controlled lunch bag and made her way to the Cross Holdings tower across the street. Security was light this late. Her forged ID led her onto the executive floor. She moved quietly, stepping into Tyler's office and placing the snake on his mahogany desk. It looked like it had just curled up and died. Ava opened a vent in the wall and slid a small USB into the office camera system, overwriting 30 minutes of footage. The next morning, Tyler walked in and froze. The snake stared back with lifeless eyes. A note pinned to the collar simply read, "You don't get to forget the ones you caged." Security footage showed nothing. The door lock logs showed no breach. Tyler shouted, demanded answers, cursed half the building. But deep inside, something worse was brewing. A suspicion that the woman he'd buried might still be breathing. Across the city, Sierra was growing anxious. The investor dinner had rattled her. She called Elise twice that afternoon, ranting about the woman with the glasses. She looked at me like she knew everything, Sierra snapped. Her voice, something about her voice. That night, Sierra went to her guest house alone. In the bathroom, she yanked open the linen cabinet, pulling out a drawer stuffed with forged documents, fake ultrasounds, fake blood work, a prosthetic bump lining, pill bottles with vitamins labeled from non-existent clinics. She started lighting them on fire in the sink, one by one. But outside, across the courtyard near the garden wall, a maintenance worker paused. He wasn't a real worker. Dax Reed held up his phone, filming silently as flames danced behind the window. The last thing the video caught before Sierra shut the blinds was the woman in silk kicking a prenatal certificate into the basin and watching it burn. He smiled to himself, pressed save, and disappeared before the lights turned back on. The ballroom shimmered under soft golden lights, its glass walls reflecting the lush greenery of the Conservation Gala's outdoor exhibits. Waitstaff in pressed uniforms moved between designer gowns and tuxedos, offering flutes of champagne to donors, socialites, and reporters, eager to cover Tyler Cross's grandest environmental initiative yet. At the front of the room, a massive LED screen looped images of Tyler holding exotic animals, Sierra smiling beside him, her hands resting on a carefully shaped baby bump. Their story, one of loss, hope, and new beginnings, had been sold to the press for weeks. But the story was about to shatter. The front doors opened, heads turned. A woman walked in slowly, flanked by two others, a silver-haired biologist and a tall man in a dark blazer holding a camera rig. She wore a black floor-length dress, sleek and unignorable. Her belly, round and real, pressed softly against the fabric as she walked. Her hair was darker now, her face sharper, but unmistakably her Ava Cross. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Champagne froze mid-air. Tyler stood frozen near the stage, jaw tight, his hand still gripped around Sierra's waist. For a second, no one moved. Then the screen behind him flickered. At first, it looked like a technical glitch. Then a video started playing. Sierra's voice crackled over the speakers. "This one's from a clinic out of state. No one checks the name. Just make sure the date matches." The footage cut to her in the bathroom, tossing paper into the sink and lighting it. Another angle showed her lifting a pillow from beneath her silk dress, breathing heavily and pulling open a drawer filled with fake documents. Tyler turned, whispering something to the tech booth. The booth lights were off. No one was inside. The next clip rolled, a dim red-lit room. Ava, pregnant, barefoot, her arms wrapped protectively around herself, crouched in the center of the vivarium. The snakes moved in the shadows, circling, coiling. Her screams echoed from the speakers, raw and real. A man's voice followed, Tyler's voice, recorded in grainy quality but unmistakable. "Leave her in. If they bite, they bite. If they don't, then maybe we learn something." The audience gasped. Murmurs grew louder. People looked around, confused, whispering. But it didn't stop there. Another video played. Elise's voice this time. A recorded phone call, shaky but clear. "I did what they asked, okay? I forged the psych evaluations. Tyler promised I'd get my cut. Ava was gone anyway. What did it matter?" Tyler lunged for the control panel near the stage, but Nora stepped in front of it, cool and still. Security didn't move. Reporters had already pulled out their phones. Ava stepped forward, calm and centered. "The woman you locked up, erased, is still standing." Sierra tried to back away, but the crowd had shifted. Several wildlife agency officers in plain clothes emerged from the perimeter. One stepped forward with a warrant in hand. "Tyler Cross, you're under arrest for illegal trafficking of genetically modified wildlife, endangerment, and fraud against the Department of Environmental Protection." Another officer grabbed Sierra by the arm. "And you, Sierra Langford, are being charged with medical fraud, identity falsification, and impersonating a pregnancy in a federal estate dispute." "Get your hands off me!" Sierra shrieked. "I'm pregnant. Her voice cracked as the bump beneath her shifted and fell sideways, the strap catching on her ribs. The silence that followed was unbearable. The baby bump wasn't real. Cameras clicked. Phones recorded. Elise, standing near the back, tried to slip away unnoticed. Ava turned, locking eyes with her sister. "Tell them who signed the will," Ava said. Elise froze. Dax stepped forward, holding up the original copy of their mother's will, notarized and time-stamped. Everything, the estate, the trust, the shares, was left to Ava and her unborn child. Elise forged medical records to have her committed and took payouts from Tyler's legal team. People began shouting. Board members walked out. Donors looked furious. One slammed a glass down and hissed, "You used my money for this?" Tyler broke free from one officer and moved toward Ava. "You think this makes you a hero?" he snarled. "You ruined everything." He reached for her arm, but something moved across the floor. A hush swept the room as a snake, small, golden brown, and unmistakably one of Tyler's rare hybrids, slithered from beneath a table and across the marble floor, stopping at Ava's feet. It paused there, tongue flicking, then turned, and faced Tyler, lifting its head with a slow, deliberate hiss. Tyler froze. Everyone stared. Ava looked down at the snake, then back up. "You tried to let them kill me, but they didn't bite, the say," creature hissed again. Tyler stumbled backward into the arms of two officers who slammed him in cuffs. He didn't speak again. Sierra sobbed as she was led out the side door. Elise didn't speak. She turned her head in shame as Ava walked past her without stopping. On the screen behind them, the final image froze. Ava, barefoot, in the vivarium, surrounded by snakes, untouched. The truth had found its way to the surface. Sunlight spilled through the high glass panels of the newly restored vivarium, warming the earth-colored tiles beneath Ava's feet. Lush greenery filled the enclosures, but there were no cages here anymore, just open habitats, carefully designed, with controlled climates and concealed observation decks. The sign at the entrance gleamed in bronze. Serpent's Grace, a place for the misunderstood. Visitors lined up at the gates, not just to see the rare reptiles, but to witness the story that had defied every expectation. News vans idled across the road. Drones hovered discreetly above the treetops. Everyone wanted to see the woman the world had once buried alive. Ava stood quietly near the center exhibit, her baby girl cradled against her chest, swaddled in a linen wrap patterned with small copper snakes. The child laughed suddenly, her voice echoing through the quiet space. A low hiss answered. From a nearby glass barrier, a long, yellow-banded viper stirred, then slowly backed away, just as the snakes had done that night in the vivarium. Another serpent slithered from a branch, circled once, and stopped short of the girl's tiny foot. It coiled in place, head low, calm. Nora stood beside them, her clipboard tucked under one arm, sunglasses perched low on her nose. "We've had 5 calls from universities asking to study her," she said, gesturing to the baby. "And 12 emails from labs that want your DNA?" Ava smiled, soft but tired. Let them wait. The past few months had been quiet, but not easy. Tyler's trial became a media circus. Sierra took a plea deal and vanished into witness protection. Elise was convicted of fraud and perjury, but managed to avoid prison through a public apology and a complete forfeiture of her inheritance. Ava never returned to the mansion. She didn't want the marble floors or the gallery walls. She built something else entirely. The sanctuary now doubled as a rehabilitation space for women with nowhere else to go, women who had survived violence, gaslighting, exile. Women who, like Ava, had been misunderstood. They worked in the gardens, helped care for the animals, reclaimed pieces of themselves in the silence between snake hisses and healing conversations. Inside the visitor center, a young reporter from the Miami Post prepared for her segment. A cameraman counted down. "Live in 3, 2. Ava adjusted the baby on her hip. The child's hand reached up and tugged gently at her mother's necklace, an old locket, simple and unadorned. "Ms. Cross," the reporter began, "some might say it's poetic that you turned the same place you were nearly killed into a sanctuary. Why snakes?" Ava looked through the glass at the creatures she once feared, now part of her legacy. "Because they're not what people think. They're not evil. They're instinctive, misunderstood. And because if they didn't strike when they had every reason to, maybe the rest of us can learn to do the same." The reporter nodded, visibly moved. "There's one thing people keep asking. How did you survive that night? How did you make it through without a single bite?" Nora stepped forward. "Because of this," she said, handing over a folder stamped with the seal of a private genetic lab. Inside were test results confirming that Ava carried a rare mutation in her skin and glandular DNA, an inherited anomaly that produced a pheromone undetectable to humans but repulsive to certain species of venomous snakes. The same mutation had been identified in her daughter. A natural immunity, never weaponized, never known, until Tyler tried to use it against her. The reporter looked stunned. "So Tyler knew?" Ava nodded. "He suspected. That's why he didn't use poison, or violence, or a gun. He wanted the child. He thought the snakes would finish me off without the mess. Clean, quiet, untraceable. But they didn't." "No," Ava said, brushing her hand gently over her daughter's head. "They saw me as one of their own." Outside, applause broke out as the first wave of visitors stepped through the guided path. Dozens of schoolchildren pressed against the viewing glass, pointing, asking questions. A mother with 2 small boys clutched a brochure that read, "The Woman Who Survived the Snakes." Ava watched for a moment, then turned back toward the habitat entrance. One snake, long and jet black with silver ridges, slithered along the edge of the stone path toward her. The baby giggled again. The snake stopped, raised its head, then coiled calmly and disappeared into a fern bed. The cameraman tilted his lens toward Ava for the final shot. A quiet voiceover played as the screen faded. They tried to silence her, with venom, but the truth shed its skin and struck back. The scene froze on Ava walking slowly through the sanctuary, child in her arms, snakes coiling behind the glass. Not to harm, but to witness. If this story moved you, hit subscribe and stay with us for more.